consensus that a young person is for around up to the age of 35 years and so. Since we are looking at this in the context of behavioral problems and looking at it within the issue of drug and substance abuse, just to look into some perspective of drug use, and this is from a report that was released by NACADA last year. And it had shown that on average, because this was a study that was done in school, it had shown on average kids up to the age of 11 years were using drugs, with a lowest report of about 4 years being reported to use drugs. So as we contextualize and look at behavioral problems and issues of addiction among young people, it's like even the people whom we thought they are very innocent, a 4-year-old, using drugs, that can be mind-boggling and also can be, something to worry as a parent, and as we look at modern day parenting and the many issues that are there. So as we look at, just to put things into perspective for this presentation, as we look at young people, we'll be looking at from the age of around 13 years to about 25 years. That is the population that we shall be looking in terms of the problem behaviors and in terms of matters addiction. So having said that, the next question that I want to, just to brainstorm and look at answers to is, so why do young people use drugs? Have the reasons that have been there before changed in the modern day that we have? Why are we having young people use drugs? We can either talk about it when we unmute ourselves, or we can have the discussion in the chat. Yes.
I think one of the an emerging reason or an emerging trend is taking drugs has become sort of fashionable, or like a trend amongst the young people. Whereas in the past it used to be something looked to be shunned. Now it's something which is like you're the cool person if you're taking drugs. If you haven't ever, you're like.
Sorry, Helen, you're breaking a bit. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, I think my internet has a problem.
Yes.
I'm saying one of the emerging trends is that taking drugs has become a fashionable trend amongst young people.
It's a trend, so it's the in thing. So it's been normalized as a kawaida thing. What are the other reasons as to why young people are using drugs?
Catherine, this is Frank.
Yes, Frank.
There is a culture of superheroes, the musicians, the sports personalities. So everybody feels they have to follow exactly what they do. If you take, for example, nowadays, I cannot remember the name, but there is the reggae person who from West Indies, where in Kayole they normally use it as a way to show them that they are in that group.
So modeling from celebrities.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think as well, availability. The drugs are available.
Availability. You can walk into a wines and spirits and buy. You can have a motorbike guide deliver to you some few blunts of, weed.
Yes, exactly.
Hello, this is Mushiri here. Hello?
Yes, Mushiri, go ahead.
Some of the people, and I'm talking from life experiences, when I was using alcohol, and I was also a smoker. When I got very high, I'll take one of my sons so that he could be my bodyguard. So what happened was, this boy, I would like tell him to drink. Well, he drank, but this culture was like going to affect him. But somehow he got into Christianity after his high school. But I think that that kind of dragging children into your fun, especially the parents, has really played a role. Until the government stopped parents from taking children to bars and restaurants and what have you, it was a very, very bad trend.
Tagging along your children as you go to drink, and of course they are there, they are observing what you're doing, and sometimes, you know, even being given to test, and it looked and seemed innocent.
Innocent, yeah.
And before Corona, thank God for some of the legislation that were done, that you cannot you know, sell beer in place where kids are, or you can't go with children in a bar. But we have these family trends. It's a family Sunday, and you know, the whole family goes with the children. The kids are in the bouncing castle, the mom is having a glass of wine, the dad is having his own beer. So what are you telling children? It's like, it's okay. Thank you so much. Yes.
Hello.
To add to that, we are having it in our own homes. There are even food homes where there is even a bar set aside within the sitting room or somewhere.
We have bars in our own house.
Yep. Can I add one more? Can I add more one reason Kinyanjui Dogon here from Open Space?
Yes, Kinyanjui, go ahead.
I think another reason probably is there are very many young people now who have access to resources, that is money. Therefore, they can afford. And it's also coming from us. Sometimes we don't know what to do with these kids, and we just throw money to them and tell them, you know, go and do what you need to do. As the country develops, as people get more and more resources, they get more and more wealthier, more and more money gets to the hands of children. Thank you.
That the kids have money, so when they have lots of money and they don't have any accountability for it, why not? They can buy a few drugs here and there. Okay, maybe Anne, you can read some of the things that people have said.
There is also copycatting.
Yes.
Copycat. You know, kids copy from others. Peer pressure. Yes.
Copycat, kids copying from other people, essence of peer pressure. All right. Yes, Anne, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much, Catherine. There are quite interesting responses on the chat box. Omondi says peer pressure is another reason why people use drugs. Then Mariana Kipsy says social media persuasion on the increase. Advertisements have also played a big role. Omondi again says genetic predisposition. Very interesting. My son, McKenna is giving her story. My son used drugs in Form 2 and Form 4, and he disclosed to me when I asked him. He told me he just wanted to forget what was happening back at home. He wished to experience some joy, and he realized drugs helped him. So Mwenda says curiosity, peer pressure, idleness, availability of funds. Mutindi Mwanzia says drugs are used as their escape. Fatima says curiosity. Mary Kamina says seeking to be heard and demonstrating heroism. Mariana again says legislative framework, not firm on those underage. That's true. And then Jane Mwangi says it will help them in their studies. Agnes says a bonding experience, a way to socialize with peers. I can see many hands were raised, but allow us to close it up at that, I think.
Yes.
Jane Mwende says, was responding to Jane's response comment. That's why they believe, but not true. Joseph Ndura says coping mechanisms to stress and anxiety. Nicoletta says GBV in the family setup. And McKenna again says a dysfunctional family can make children take drugs.
Quite an exhaustive list that has been given right there, you know, from curiosity to peer pressure to availability to dysfunctionalities that are there in the family, and the young people are using it as a coping mechanism. Others will use it because they think that it's going to enhance their performance, you know, being lied to, they are going to perform better in school, they will remember better when they take some certain substances. And just to see how it happens in form of experimenting. And most importantly, when you're looking especially for adolescents, they need to fit in because it's a stage of, you know, identifying who their models is. And if they feel they're being left out just by virtue of they cannot use substances, then that could be one of the reasons as to why they use. Other reason that has been given, it could be as a result of psychological distress. It's being used as a coping mechanism, learning difficulties, and this may translate to someone having a negative, perception about self. And because they can't understand, they can't concentrate, they are not able to perform well in school, then the alternative would be to drink so that people may have something to talk about. Then issues of poor self-image. And poor self-image can affect not just adolescents, but even the young adults. I remember I had a client that I was working with, and this client, it's as beautiful as people can describe. But inside her, she felt that she wasn't beautiful, she wasn't good enough. And in the spirit of wanting to fit in, she was introduced to marijuana by the friends, that she can only hang around with them because on condition that she's going to be using marijuana. Aspect of social alienation, when you don't have friends, and substances being a way of coping. Then antisocial behavior, which may be seen as a form of rebellion, but to some degree it can be a beginning of development of conduct disorders, which are, you know, quite may go undetected in when the adolescents are in school, and people may just speak that someone is being indisciplined. Then another cause of people, adolescents and young people using drugs could be histories of sexual and physical abuse. When they have been abused and they cannot talk to anyone, then there is a possibility that they may use drugs. For young adults, again, as a coping mechanism, you go with the pressures of life, getting a job and such kind of things. Then also wanting to seem as grown up. I mean, there is always that, I can't remember what it was, but there is an aspect of you can drink Guinness. When you drink Guinness, you are a man. So if you're drinking, it's showing that now you have met the qualifications of what it means to be a man. Pastime activity. Right now, you know, people have limited things to do. Kids are at home. People are working from home. So it's a pastime activity when people are idle. And then the attitude, especially when someone has just gotten a job, it's life, you live once. So that YOLO attitude may translate to, you know, people just getting introduced and using drugs and other substances. So that said, the next question that I want to ask is, do we have other reasons that have emerged from the conventional ones that we know? Do we have some specific reasons that, I know I've mentioned issues of being idleness. Do we have some other specific reasons that we can attribute to this COVID moment? You know, are there any other things that we can place and say that these young people are using drugs because of the current situation that we are finding ourselves in? I'd want to open it for a discussion. Just one or two statements. Yes, Mushiri.
In Moranga the other day, people are using the sanitizer because the bars would not be open. They thought that by using the sanitizer, the government would maybe lift the ban on bar closures. So this is an attitude that they develop to think they are punishing the authority. And they forget, yes. Yeah,
Thinking they are punishing the authority, and they are the same people who are going to suffer. They are the people who are directly going to be affected by it.
Yes. Yes.
Interesting. I can see Helen writing, Muranga people, calling them up. Do we have Muranga people in the group?
Catherine, we are many in that category.
We know how to discover things.
Yes, we do.
Very adventurous to quench the thirst.
Hi, this is David.
It's David.
Yeah, so I'm looking at, there was this rumor about alcohol being a cure for the COVID-19. And you know, this thing was trending in the internet and all the social media. So I think it will have contributed in some way.
People being lied to when you take alcohol, you'll not get corona, or
Yes.
it's a cure for corona.
There are 70% alcohol.
And finding different ways of bringing it out.
Yes.
Okay, and maybe just to go back in terms of the coping mechanism, right now we know it's an anxiety, provoking moment for many of us, young people and even adults included. So it's at the very moment is some of the reasons why people are overly using drugs and alcohol. It's because they are using it as a way of coping, using it because they are stressed, using it because they are very unsettled, using it because they don't know about tomorrow. And the sad thing is that because the bars are closed, people may not be able to spend time with their friends. This is now referring to the young adults who have access to bars. Then and also limited income coming in, you may find that people are now shifting to use stronger substances, moving from beers to using spirits, to using those strong brands of alcohol that may stimulate or may lead to people getting the high quite fast. But it's not just the alcohol that you're making reference here. There is, marijuana, there is bangi that is very highly used among the young people, and they're looking at it as a lifestyle. So as a coping mechanism right now, most of the people are using it for such purposes. Then now just looking at what are some of the sources in which and how people are able to access. Currently, because of closure of bars, you find that people are ordering alcohol and such online from supermarkets, from wines and spirit shops. But now when you move to other drugs that are illegal, when you're talking about things like bangi, for instance, from the points, from the kiosk point down below, it's something that I picked from the NACADA study. And this, the school-going children, when they were asked where they get their drugs from, they say they get it from kiosks and they get it from shops near school, meaning that the shops that are near school, they are preying on the young children, and in most cases some of the drugs are quite well packaged as sweets. Then bars near schools, from friends, buying from other people's and other workers. So like someone mentioned, one of the reasons as to why young people continue to use it, because it's available. And I mean, kiosks are there to sell bread and everything else, so it can be seen as innocent, but there could be of it. And unfortunately, the place where we buy bread could be the same place where our 16-year-old is also getting their supply of drugs. Any other sources that we know?
Once again, they are being ferried by riders to various points.
Yes.
And it's only a phone call away. These days, you just the youth just call. There is a number, especially in estates. You'll find they have a number which they call, and the man is right at your doorgate or at your gate and gives the kids, and the kid gives the money. Yes.
Dial that delivery, nobody would know what is it that you're being asked. That is quite true and very common with even the school-going children. You know, and sometimes parents may not be aware of that. You know what, your daughter, your son just steps outside the gate and they are going to meet their supplier. So yeah, riders being the ones that are delivering the drugs. So
Catherine, sorry.
Yes.
There's one raising his hand. David is raising his hand.
Yes, David.
Oh, sorry, I already contributed. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Excuse me. I think we might need to add the security guards in some estates in that list. They have become very popular.
The security guard. And you know what is quite interesting is that the security guards, and even in rehabilitation and treatment facilities, you can imagine someone has been taken there, and for those who are working in treatment facilities probably may share their experience. You have your guard there, but is the same person who is bringing supply to the clients who have gone in there for rehabilitation. And that brings me to the next item that I want us to discuss and talk about. So what are some of the risk factors that are exposing young people to use substances? What are those things that are making it possible for young people to be able to access, use drugs, even to other degrees of becoming addicted?
Hi, Catherine.
Yes. Hi.
Maybe I can weigh in on that one.
Yes.
And I work in an institution of higher learning, and what I've noticed is all the cases we have of drug abuse, okay, around 95%, they have begun drugs way at an earlier level, either in high school or in primary school. So that in itself makes them now become more vulnerable to getting addicted when they come to the university due to the freedom they experience there.
They have already been exposed to drugs early, and you know, going to an institution of higher learning, it's almost a 360 degrees of freedom. So that even making it a fertile ground for them to use without being, you know, questioned. What are the other risk factors? So that would be the environment where people find themselves in, and early exposure.
Catherine, I think I can read one or two responses.
Yes.
On the chat box, someone is saying, Sakema is saying, drug use, boredom, and that's curiosity to fit in. And Twala is saying lack of parental supervision.
Is that Twala, Judy Twala?
I believe.
Yes.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, Catherine.
How are you?
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for joining in and contributing to this conversation.
Karibu sana.
Okay. So some of the risk factors that expose young people to, you know, use of drugs is that, looking at it from 4 levels: 1, family, school, community, and individuals or the peer. When you're looking at the family, if there is a family history of problem behavior like substance use, just like the example that Moshiri was giving us about, you know, being carried and tagged along to bars. So that family history may be a risk factor to a young person using substances. Again, because we've looked at it as a coping mechanism, and this may not just be for young person, but also for adults equally. Any kind of a loss, maybe loss of a family member or a friend, can also be a risk factor. If there are family conflicts, if there are issues at home, and issues in terms of managing the problems that emanate from the household, then that could be another risk factor that may expose young people to using. Having access to substances, again, when you are having bars at home, when you can easily access it from the kiosk, again, contributing factor. If someone is coming from a family environment where there is violence, where there is cases of physical and emotional abuse, and even mental illnesses, because some of the mental illnesses people may use for purposes of self-medication. And like someone had mentioned earlier in some of the reasons as to why people use, when there is genetic vulnerability, of substance use, and also other mental disorders and personality traits that can also influence or can be a risk factor for substance use among young people from a family level. Then when it comes to school, is the environment at school. If there is no close supervision at school, it's a laissez-faire kind of attitude that happens at school. And even at home, when there is limited supervision, that can be, again, another risk factor. Academic failure. If someone doesn't achieve the grades or the results they hoped to achieve, then they can also be predisposed to using. Lack of personal commitment, again, at school, under the school factor, and the kind of relationships that they may adopt with their peers. Whom do they hang around with? That, again, can be a contributor. And then here comes the community. You know, when you're looking at, before, every child was being raised by every, adult that was available. But nowadays, we don't have that attachment within the neighborhood. Everyone is raising their own children. Nobody is concerned about the other child. So that lack of cohesion within the community is exposing young people to using drugs. Then when you're also looking at the fact that the same members of community are the same members who are selling the drugs to the young people. So meaning that the communal responsibility of raising children is hardly there, making the drugs available, again, a contributor. Then we have the media, which glorifies, use of drugs, which portrays some particular drugs like alcohol as being a very, or rather something that is nice. Then from an individual perspective, if you're looking at someone who has experienced child abuse, either physical violence, sexual violence, or any other form of violence within the family, that is someone who is exposed to probably developing a case of drug or substance problem. Then inability to perform some certain tasks, we saw that people may use because they believe that it will build confidence in them. So those people who may have a very negative self-image and self-perception, low self-esteem, are again at risk of developing drug and substance problem. Then there are just people who are naturally wired to seek experiences and take risks. In one of the presentations, when you're looking at personality, so the type of personality can also be a contributor. There are people who are naturally hedonists, they seek pleasure. So those can be very exposed to developing drug. Identity development, when you're looking at adolescents being the watershed stage for identity development, and depending on who are the people and what is the kind of perception that this young person may have, using drugs to fit in can be something that someone may think of engaging in. Then also when they are alienated or because of the rebellious behavior, and everyone ni kama amemrushia mkono. So you may find that after all, I'm nothing, nobody is going to ask me, and that may be giving them a macho effect. And if nobody is concerned about the welfare of the person, is like someone becomes neglected, then that may expose the person to a potential development of SUD or drug and substance problem. Then when you're looking at the culture, the cultural identity and connection, when an individual does not appreciate where they are coming from. Imagine a situation where, nothing against the pastors, if we have pastors in the meeting, when you're looking at a family that is nurtured with some certain specific values, that no substance use is part of it, but just someone, for sake of rebelling, they want to deviate from that, and this is probably a pastor's child, daughter or son, but because they want to show their parents that they can always go against them, then going against parental guidance can be, again, another risk factor. Then last but not least, under the friends and peers, you can also look at the minimization of the harm that the substances have. Hii haitakufanyia kitu. So because of that minimization of the harm, you may find that someone may start taking in, and they have already been cured. There is no harm that they are going to experience. And this is partly one of the reasons as to why when young people and adolescents, when they use, they have a high risk of having overdoses, and they have a risk of being involved in accidents, because they are not really able to gauge what is dangerous and what is not. So those are some of the risk factors. We can add on to those risk factors in the community, I mean in the chat, as we continue. Unless there is a question, I want us to just discuss on another question. What are some of the signs that a parent or someone can tell that a young person is using drugs? What are the telltale signs? How did we discover that our child, how did we discover that someone was using drugs? Or what can we tell someone to watch out for?
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, my name is Jane.
Yes,
from
Jane.
Kiambu. Yeah, I'm listening in, and I'm happy kind of knowledge I'm gathering. I would say that probably you would see change of behavior in your child if you know them well. You'd see that eating from the way they have been behaving, and then maybe they become a little bit rude or unruly. And then there have not been people who have been going out too much and coming home late. And if they are very young kids, probably you would see that they are not even attentive to what you say. So I think those are the few that I can share for now. So there are many more others.
Behavior change, disregard for curfew, spending more time outside, lack of concentration.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Catherine. I think I can read out Twala's comment on the chat box. She says, kids becoming aggressive and wanting to be left on their own. So that's behavioral. And then Wanda says, behavior change, having bloodshot eyes, that's true, increases or decreased appetite, increased sleep or reduced sleep, so sleeping patterns, and then avoiding eye contact. Then Catherine Muthiani says withdrawal, isolation, avoidance. Frank Lawrence says dropping in grades, that's in school. Then Joyce Waweru says picking new friends all of a sudden.
So basically change in behavior, and you know, someone may start camouflaging and wearing, you know, perfumes, chewing, always chewing something mint-like. Sudden need for privacy and such. So we can look at various signs of use in different categories. There will be the behavioral changes, which are quite easy to detect. Then there will be change in physical appearance of the person. Then there will be some psychological changes that someone may also experience. And when you're looking at the behavioral change, drop in grades, need for isolation, getting new friends, getting into conflicts, being aggressive, you know, wanting to have a private moment, lack of respect for authority can also be the one, lack of eye contact, bloodshot eyes, like people have said, you will hear your teachers or teachers from school complaining. If it's at work, people will start complaining. Then having unexplained disappearances for, a certain period of time, starting to get isolated from friends. So those are some of the behavioral changes that we can see. Some of the psychological signs that we can identify, it's either having a very slurred speech or very rapid speech, talking very fast, laughing for no apparent reason. What is one drug? What is the drug that, if someone is under the influence, would laugh for no apparent reason?
I think it is cannabis.
Then also, as they laugh for no apparent reasons, they can be abnormally loud or very obnoxious. They can also develop paranoia, which is unexplainable, having frequent mood swings and emotional instability, and then having oscillation of high moments and low moments, which may not be explainable. Then also becoming very manipulative and some deceitful behavior, lack of motivation in doing things. Then they may generally just, lack energy, very lethargic. Then also having memory problem, like someone has said, poor concentration. And then when it comes to some of the health symptoms that we can pick is someone nose bleeding, and this can happen as a result of snorting drugs. And sometimes there was an interesting case that I was working with, and someone, in terms of experimenting and finding experience, a young person shared of having crushed Panadol. And the person was experiencing nose bleeding because since the particles could not be as fine as cocaine, so those particles were the ones that were damaging the tissues in their nose, and the person would constantly be going to hospital. Then constipation may also be another health problem that may happen. Then also people may start suddenly experiencing seizures, which may not have any history or explanation of epilepsy. Having a runny nose when they sniff, shakes or tremors, accidents or injuries can be things to look out for. And for physical appearance, poor hygiene goes without saying. Poor coordination of things, clenching their teeth, having bloodshot eyes, cuts and bruises. And in terms of behavioral changes, you may find that they are suddenly wearing long sleeves, which may be a way to hide the injection sites or the cut marks. Then also constantly scratching, especially if someone has been exposed to use of heroin. So those are some of the changes that we can use to identify whether someone is using drugs. Another question that I want us just to brainstorm in the minutes that we have is, so what are some of the commonly abused drugs by young people? And do we have some emerging ones from the traditional drugs that we have been knowing? Throw it back to the group. Yes. Yes, Mushiri.
We have Chavis, which is in Bake, but well-grounded. We have Heroi. We have soda mixed with Panadol. You get a drink. Yes, maybe a few of those.
All right, thank you. Any other?
And I think also we have codeine, which is contained in the cough syrup. It's becoming more used, especially among the youth who are chewing mira.
Codeine and combination of, like someone is using two different drugs. So in addition to the ones that we know, kina tobacco, smoking, we know very popular with young people is Chavis. Others will call it Dovu. There's marijuana, which the ones that is potent, you'll hear them calling it shash. in some cases, and this may depend on the affluence of people, there are some that are using cocaine. It may not be many people because of how expensive it is. For those who are using Kuber, there are some that tend to combine with other drugs, heroin. And we may think that our children are safe when they're in school. I remember working with a client in one of the national schools, and his introduction to drugs was, through the peers, as a desire and a need to fit in from what he did not have at home. And he was introduced to heroin while he was in Form 1. Very sad situation, and the family was not really a well-off family. So that translated to this young person starting to steal things from colleagues at school until it was detected, and unfortunately he was expelled from school because there were other behavioral concerns. Like someone has said, there has been an upsurge of use of codeine, the cough syrup. In most cases, you'll find that people just have this sudden love for taking blackcurrant soda. But news is that that blackcurrant soda is mixed with some codeine. Then when it comes to marijuana, the various variants and presentation, there are the edibles, the cookies, in mabuyu, in cakes. People have pizza parties that it's just weed and such. Then also there is slowly development, and even from the NACADA study, happy that Judy is here, that prescription medication is also being used by young people. Ritalin being one of the medication that is used for managing attention deficit hyperactive disorder. It's a stimulant, so some of them use it for enhanced concentration, but also because it's addictive. Then Valium and also Domicam, people, you will hear them call it the blue pill. Then for some who may have been exposed to treatments, there are some that abuse attain. So those are some of the prescription medications that young people are using. And because I was just reading somewhere that you can actually order, or rather it was possible to order as early as March this year, Ritalin online without being checked whether you have underlying medical condition that needs you to have it. So because of technology and because of online access, then it is predisposing people to have increased access to some of these substances. So how do they take, and do we have some emerging modes of administration? There are different ways of taking the drugs. Very common one: oral, smoking, sniffing, snorting, injecting, intramusculine. There's a one that they put beneath the tongue. And that is quite common with Kuber and Chavis. I have highlighted some of two quite popular, or rather one of it which is becoming quite popular with the young people, and that is vaping for tobacco users. And this also we see, especially right now that there is lockdown, as much as shisha den were closed. There are people who are right in their homes, a couple of people that I know, who have their shisha bongs at home and they vape while in the house. So I want just to highlight, how many of us know the butt chugging? Is it new to us, or is it something that we have heard of before?
It's new to me.
Quite new.
Quite
yeah,
new.
It's quite new. It's quite new.
Maybe for me, I've had it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is basically the mode of administration whereby the person is using the drugs, take it through the anus.
Yes.
Yes.
And mostly for alcohol, just to increase the amount that it's like you're getting 100% of what you use. So that's an illustration of butt chugging. This was codeine that this young, I don't have any rights to these images, the young person was using, but yeah, those are some of the ways in which people in the spirit of adventuring and how to get high quite fast may employ that we need to be quite aware of. Then there is the vaping. This is an example of the pen. So, but bird shagging is one of the new ways in which people are adopting to use drugs so that they can maximize from it. Then probably the other emerging mode of administration is mixing the drugs with something else to ensure that one doesn't go detected. And it's, you know, things are changing in our society. And one of the schools near where I live, primary school, there were cases of children or the pupils going to school with alcohol in their water bottles. So you would think that they are carrying water, but what they have in their bottles is actually alcohol. Until the school passed that kids cannot go to school with colored bottle, they had to all carry clear bottles. So a drug user will find ways and means of ensuring that they use their drugs undetected. So because we were looking at emerging trends of addiction and problem behaviors, so as we wind up, just to looking at some of the worrying problem behaviors that are there, young people in addition to substance use. Oh, maybe one more thing that I forgot to mention in terms of the modes of administration. It has been here for a while now, and for the girls, they normally dip alcohol into tampons and they insert. So that is one of the ways of utilizing the mucous membranes to ensure, and that is the way in which the substance gets into the whole body system. So as we gear towards closing up, is looking at, so what are some of these worrying problematic behaviors that young persons are presenting? You can write it on the chat and you can hear from one or two. Anne?
Yes, thank you very much, Catherine. There's some, Sally is asking, is the tampon one part of butt chugging?
It's close to, they're a bit related to butt chugging. It's only that both of them are getting into the system through the mucous membranes, but the butt chugging, just like the name says, is through the anus. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think we can open up this floor to anyone with questions or something, a comment.
On the worrying problem behaviors among the young persons right now, and you know, as far as dealing with young people is concerned.
So maybe
yes.
I'd like to add something. So there is also a trend. I don't know whether somebody else have observed that. There are some youth who also use the normal shoe polish, kiwi, and the fountain pens.
And
fountain pen. It's not a fountain pen. Yes. So I don't know which chemical composition it have that makes one high, but definitely have seen somebody using kiwi.
That's quite new. Yeah. Maybe someone in the group may share if they know.
Hi, Catherine Muthiani.
Hi, Susan.
The kiwi thing has been there for long. Especially with students, they've been sniffing the kiwi for quite some time. And the felt pens, ones you write with. The other thing that is coming on is now what you're calling the mixing of drugs.
Yeah.
Where they are mixing, either you take a few D5s and then you take alcohol so that you get a higher high. And the tampon also has been there for long, especially when the girls are using the vagina.
Yeah.
where they claim that they can't get HIV and they also can't get pregnant if they have sex and they use alcohol up their vagina. So these things are there.
Thank you. Very, very insightful. And as you just mentioned, you know, the issues of sniffing and glue and all that. I've just remembered, I don't know whether it was a form of addiction that was developing. This was just personal experience. When I was pregnant, I used to I used to get a heavenly feeling around petrol stations. So we also know that there is sniffing of petrol and all. So the problem behaviors that we may have, I think I've just seen something on the chat, you know, seeing ambulances carrying young people to go to have a party. There are cases of, you know, sexual problems that are there, increased cases of pornography. Pornography has been there, you know, before, but then again, with the advent of technology and access of internet, the cases have gone quite up. Then, you know, unplanned pregnancies, abortions and all. When you're looking at universities and probably even the trend, it's still the same right now. You'll find that people are more scared of getting pregnant than contracting sexually transmitted illnesses, and the business in the universities of postnatal is quite something. Then also other issues and concerns that we may need to have is, you know, mood disorders, cases of depression, also disruptive behaviors, things like conduct disorders, which in most cases may go undetected in schools. You may find that a young person is having a mental illness, but it's considered as an disciplinary problem in school. Issues of ADHD, suicide also be on the increase, anxiety disorders, cases of post-traumatic stress disorders. When you're looking at some of the things that may make someone risky, the risk developing substance use problems, eating disorders, because this is a stage of development of image. So young people may either develop anorexia or bulimia nervosa, and also cases of schizophrenia could also be other problematic concerns that we may need to address with the young people. I'm just rushing in the interest of time. Here I have something on an indication of what would we consider normal, what would we consider abnormal. And this is not just for young people, but it's generally when you're working with person as a whole. A normal person has an efficient perception about reality, what is going on, not hearing things that don't exist, being able to reason enough and understand circumstances. Then also being aware of their inner motives and feelings. I've not arranged them on the reverse of each, so I'm just going to read through on normality. Then also having voluntary control of behavior, that they can actually make a choice on why they behave, or person is able to make a choice on why they behave the way they do. Having high level of self-esteem and acceptance of self as well as others. Then having a positive attitude towards self. Things may not work out as one expects, but knowing that, you know, they still are worth, they still are good enough. Having the capacity to make sense of one's ability, talents, and maximize potential. Being able to put into use what we have been given and also the resources that we have available. Then ability to withstand social pressure and peer pressure, and also being productive, being able to achieve some results at the end of the day. So as we look at problem behaviors, just to move now to the spectrum of abnormality, some of the things that we see, it's the distorted perception of reality, deviation from statistical norm, what is expected, what is the normal, deviation from social norms. If within a society, within a community, people have been married off when they are already completed school, and then suddenly we have young people getting pregnant. We have young people starting to use substances. So that may communicate there is a problem. Then self-rejection, someone feeling that they are not worth it, they're not good enough. Engaging in behavior that brings physical, physiological suffering, self-hurt. And we know in some of the mental problems, like people suffering from depression and all, there is the self-harm, cutting self. And this, for some parents, it may go undetected. I remember working with a client who had been harming herself for 4 years while she was in school. And the parent, they never knew that their daughter was harming themselves, and there were all cut marks on the body. Then not being able to control one's behavior, that compulsivity, and that happens in development of addiction, unable to deal with uncertainties and ambiguities when things are not clear, when we don't know about tomorrow. And right now we find ourselves in such a situation because of what is happening with coronavirus. So there are so many uncertainties that are there. So how we handle ourselves, how we deal with such uncertainties may either determine whether we are behaving normally or not. But then our CS told us the disease will treat us abnormally. So we can still look at it as being a normal behavior because we're finding ourselves in a normal situation. Then unable to establish and maintain meaningful relationships with others, right from parents and even the peers and the people around us, that can show us we have we may be indicating problematic behaviors. So how do we intervene? How do we help? Helen, how much time do we have? Hello?
Yes, you can continue. Helen.
Sorry.
It's okay. Just continue, maybe for like 3 minutes, then or 4 minutes, then we can close it up.
All right, thank you so much.
Yes.
I know we are very resourceful people in the group, and thank you for the contribution that you've made. So there's a lot that can be done, from the strengthening preventive measures to ensure that they don't use, especially when you're looking at protecting young people. And that starts from the home, going back to the risk factors and translating them to be protective factors, creating a safe environment at home, building good relationships at home, validating the young person so that they believe that they are good enough. Then in school, again, also the same protective measures are put in place in such a way that there is minimization of use of substances. Then for the community, I think we have a huge responsibility to play, just ensuring that you're not that one person that makes it possible for a young individual to access drugs. And if the cases escalate, the underlying problem behavior, issues of family dysfunction, issues of mental disorders, issues of other psychological problems, then one can get professional help, a counselor, psychiatrist. If it's a serious case of addiction, then probably getting specialized treatment in addiction. So there are lots of things that we can do, but in most cases, what is important is to prevent before it happens. So I think I want to, I've rushed up a bit when I realized that time was not on my side, and there are people who have started making noise on the other end. So I want to end it there and thank everyone for, for your attendance, for your participation, and thank you, Anne, for coordinating the session. And also in a special way, thank Helen for giving me an opportunity to share and interact. It's one of the ways I'm using for coping at this time. So thank you for constantly giving me this opportunity.